This is the BrainChip podcast. Hear from our thought leaders about neuromorphic computing, beneficial AI, and how BrainChip's Akita is pushing AI to the edge. This podcast is a place for investors, practitioners, and anyone interested in the future of AI.
Hi all, I'm Rob Telson, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at BrainChip. Welcome, and thank you for joining our 7th episode of our BrainChip podcast series. Today's podcast is structured to provide our new and current listeners a path to better understand AI and its broad ecosystem. For those that are new to our podcast series, please take time to listen to our other episodes by going to our Learn tab at our website at www.brainchip.com. Today, we'll continue with our outside looking in theme by venturing broader into the AI ecosystem by having a discussion with Zach Shelby, co-founder and CEO of Edge Impulse. Zach is an experienced technologist who is now focused on delivering the ultimate developer experience for embedded machine learning solutions. Zach, on behalf of BrainChip and our listeners, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks, Rob. Awesome to be here.
What excites me about this podcast, Zach, is the opportunity to learn more about Edge Impulse and truly understand how your team is addressing a massive challenge that exists today in the field of AI. For our listeners, the challenge is getting machine learning tools simple, efficient, and effective enough to increase productivity and support the capabilities of the evolution of the AI processors today, such as BrainChip's Akita. Zach, why don't you take a moment and provide our listeners with a bit of background on yourself, as well as give us some color into Edge Impulse.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Important to keep in mind about the world of machine learning and artificial intelligence is that really it has a lot more potential than just AI. That's the thing. The way that I think of it is as a tool that can be used much more broadly across the entire domain of development and engineering. So if you think about AI today, right, people are selling AI as the product. Oh, we do facial recognition, right? Or we do fraud detection using AI. However, right, what AI really does is it opens up data as the tool for driving algorithm development and engineering design. You can start to use data to drive the problem solving process. Whereas today we use code, right? And coding as kind of a manual human process as the problem solving toolkit. And so our vision is that over the next decade, we're going to see a data-driven engineering process take hold across all industries for all engineers, all software developers. We'll start to use a data-driven approach to solving problems. And that revolution is starting at the edge. It's really interesting that edge compute and embedded compute is kind of wide open because there never has been solutions for data science and machine learning in the past. So it's kind of a wide open space where we haven't solved problems in the wrong way. So we can solve them in the right way from the beginning. And from there, I believe that this will catch on to all the rest of the engineering domains, including the cloud. And the key here is if you want to open this up for data-driven engineering more broadly, you need to open it up for developers and engineers. And that's what we're focused on at Edge Impulse.
That is great. And I have to tell you, you are really fortunate, in this ever-changing AI environment, you get a very broad understanding of applications, as well as a great vantage point of where AI is heading. And the fact that we're approaching this in a way that you use data-driven engineering, I really see that as broadening it out and recognizing that there's a lot here and where we're going. So I have a question about Edge Impulse and how you guys are embracing the AI ecosystem today, and where does it go in the future?
I think ecosystem is the right word here. So I was the founder and CTO of one of the first Internet of Things companies in the world. And that was back in 2005. And we grew that company and eventually exited to ARM back in 2013. And something I learned during that adventure was that you can't do everything on your own. Back when we started, right, it was the kind of trend in the technology industry that you kind of built everything yourself, right? You did everything in-house. But we slowly realized that, wow, we need to partner across silicon vendors. We need to partner with cloud providers as they started to pop up during that time. And as I became part of ARM, that only became more apparent, right? With ARM's ecosystem culture, that, wow, if you really want to build something big and you want to scale across and change an entire industry, you have to do that with partners. You've got to do that across not only the entire hardware industry, but you've got to tie into all the different software players that are relevant. At the same time, you do have to solve the whole problem, right? You've got to be able to give the customer the whole thing that they need to be successful. So your job is oftentimes to tie up an ecosystem so that everything works. And that's how you can think about our philosophy at Edge Impulse, right? We are providing the entire end-to-end user experience for developers and engineers. So we focus entirely on the normal developer engineer that doesn't have deep ML experience. They have some, or they understand what can be done, but they're not ML experts. And they need that entire flow of development, like from early data collection directly from the sensors that they're working with, all the way through to ML ops and deployment, automation tools. They need all of that. And then what we do is we partner really deeply with the different hardware targets that are appropriate for the industries that we're working in. Things like industrial applications, asset tracking, health and medical devices, consumer devices. We make sure that we have a hardware supported. And we do that in a very deep, meaningful way with partners like BrainChip. We have to go really deep into the technology together to make sure that the data collection process works really, really well, right? Out of the box, it's a very simple process. It's very intuitive. And that all of the algorithms are completely, cross-optimized for the hardware. So when we generate a DSP algorithm or we generate a neural network, that has to run as efficiently as possible on that hardware, right, out of the box. And that takes a lot of effort between the partners working on this. But that's what it takes to make sure that user experience is spot on.
This is really important for all of us to digest. The AI ecosystem is dependent on not only data sets and networks and CNNs in order to process information, but it's also, as Zach highlighted, the partnerships and the demand for establishing these partnerships in order to evolve the whole space. And as you said, over the longer period of time, as these partnerships continue to grow and develop, then it's going to enable a lot of us to really provide some powerful solutions. And, the one thing that you highlighted, again, the data-driven engineering component is critical. So getting a good understanding of how this is evolving in the future allows us to get a good feel for the evolution of the overall ecosystem, including the use of your applications for BrainChip's Akita technology as well. Zach, how do you see the demand for edge AI evolving over the next 5 years?
We've already been surprised. We came into this market, founded Edge Impulse about 2 years ago after we had done some of the first open source work in kind of embedded machine learning on microcontrollers. We went and started Edge Impulse, and we had a plan that, it's going to grow this fast, and we're going to see this kind of customer demand. And every single quarter, we have doubled our estimates.
Wow.
That's how fast this market has been growing. It's really incredible how the entire silicon industry has embraced machine learning as a future workload, right? Something that has to be supported on silicon parts. But enterprises have seen the value too. And I think it's just pent up demand, right? They've been dealing with data for a long time, and they haven't found ways to really make use of data. It's all been like something that's been an afterthought, right? We're going to collect an entire data lake. First, we'll collect a warehouse of data, right, from IoT devices. Then we'll collect a data lake, and then we'll send some analysts in there to the lake and try to figure out what do we do with all this data, right? And it's very hard, right, to do this after the fact. So now, what I think what we're connecting with really in industry is this pent up demand to make use of the data, because it is very valuable, right? That customer knowledge, the data from real products in the field, right? That has access to what's really going on, right, with their customers. Being able to unlock that data to create valuable data sets that we could use for, driving real algorithms, features, right, for their customers. that's gold for companies, all kinds of OEMs that make real physical products. And so we are seeing that heat up. The way I look at the market is that, we're kind of looking at a $70 billion silicon hardware market in the coming years. And on top of that, right, Microsoft recently estimated the size of the AI software industry on the edge at about $240 billion.
Right.
And so you're going to see, hardware stacked up with a lot of software value on both platforms and algorithms, as well as, vertical solutions. And I think solutions will be a big part of this, right? People creating these solutions that make use of machine learning. So we have plenty of market to work with. The real key now is education and acceleration. So we put a lot of energy right now into educating the market, training developers. We recently released a free Coursera course called Introduction to Embedded Machine Learning. I recommend that for everyone. We have a great set of guest lecturers that's sponsored by ARM, Arduino, and the TinyML Foundation together to kind of make sure that we can educate people on what embedded machine learning is, right? What can it do? How does it work? And the other thing that we do is we have a very generous free tier to our product, right? Edge Impulse, you can just go and sign up for. You just need your first name and your email and you're in. And that's an account that will let you do real production TinyML development out of the box. There's no trial limit on that. You can actually use this for real applications. And we do that to make sure that we get everybody on board with learning what can be done and then starting to use this professionally. And that will speed up the market. That will accelerate applications. That will get us great case studies and design wins where we can help show people what's possible. And already I think we're seeing the effect of that. We're seeing more and more companies come in and wanting to go to production with this faster than when they normally would have, because they can see what's possible a lot more quickly.
The way that you've approached it is spot on. So it's exciting to sit here and I hope our listeners resonate with this, that the opportunities in this space right now are endless. And it's just about the ecosystem catching up to being able to support all the different opportunities that exist today and will exist. And when I think about that, Zach, when you look at specific applications for the edge, what markets do you feel will be addressed in the short term? Let's just say within the next 3 to 5 years, and then the long term, when we look 10 years out, what do you see as the key markets?
Yeah, so we recently did a data analysis of the applications that we see on Edge Impulse. Edge Impulse has already been used for over 25,000 ML projects across tens of thousands of developers. So we pulled out some data of the kind of real commercial opportunities coming out of that. And what we found was that 3 major kind of use cases for edge machine learning were predictive maintenance in machines. So that's in industrial machines, motors, pumps, HVAC. We're seeing that in automotive. We see it in infrastructures of all times. So electric grid infrastructures, for example. And then we're seeing applications in white goods. The other application area we see is in asset tracking. So think of predictive maintenance as like fixed goods, things that aren't moving. Asset tracking is things that are moving. And those tend to be like logistics and shipping, right? Tracking packages, monitoring cold chain, tracking the integrity of vaccines and shipments. Anything you can imagine that's on the move gets into asset tracking. So it's low power, battery operated, devices. It also means monitoring the environment. So we're seeing a lot of back to work past COVID, people returning to spaces, not just offices, but spaces in general, right? And those spaces need to be monitored for human activity for safety reasons. So lots going on there. And the final area we see is kind of human interaction and sensing. So applications where it's human-centric. So we have health wearable devices and medical devices. We're measuring the actual human biosensors, motion and gestures. We're seeing a lot of radar kind of interesting gesture interface applications. So interfacing with radars, With hand gestures, we see keyword spotting, so wake words with audio becoming more and more common. I'd say one of the most mature applications right now in the space. And many more things around like industrial safety type of applications for humans. Those are kind of three main kind of buckets of use cases that we see. Covers probably 80% of the applications that we're seeing today. And I'll just give you a great example of like a real customer case. We worked with Isoelectro, which is a major electrical grid supply company. So they create like the the insulators that go on power poles. Their team had created a smart sensor for, or I'd say they created a not so smart sensor for these power pole insulators. So when you have an insulator on a power pole, there's actually a little bit of overflow current that always comes through the insulator. And you can measure that. So they created this sensor that measures some power factors like once a day, sends it over cellular to the network. So they kind of see what's going on in the grid. They came to us wanting to use Edge Impulse to do real-time event detection on the power grid, on each power line pole. And so they made that sensor into a smart sensor, and they collected some data sets in the laboratory using the tools to detect things like lightning strikes, branches hitting lines, ice buildup on lines, fires near lines, other kinds of line damage in real time at very low powers, so that they could not only send some generic, power factors once a day, they could immediately tell you when there was a lightning strike on a power pole, or more importantly, when there's a fire right around a power pole. That's done in a way that because you can monitor at very low power, you don't have to turn on the cellular network until you're really sure you have something. They can do that with up to 20 years of battery life, because those are actually battery powered devices. It's really hard to get a power supply up there on the power line. Amazing application, right? That has the potential to change the way that the safety of power grids work. Here in California, forest fires are a huge problem. And a lot of the forest fires have been caused by problems with the power grid. So not last fall, but the fall before that, the Camp Fire, for example, was entirely caused by a power line failure that couldn't be pinpointed, right? They didn't know where it was. They didn't know exactly when it happened. And this is something that could have been prevented. Yeah,
that's an amazing use case. And, going back to what you were just talking about where we see specific applications in the next 3 to 5 years, and then looking further out, I think we're in complete agreement. The main point I like to get across is, we are truly at the tip of the iceberg. Besides the industrial applications and really leveraging what's common today, and with object detection and image classification and keyword spotting, as you highlighted the fact that there's this demand for autonomous and electric vehicles that provide us with a ton of features and functionality that will aggressively drive, the requirements for low power applications within these vehicles. And there's only so much power that these vehicles can consume. And then you start looking further out at what we look at is white goods and consumer applications, or smart city and smart home. And then you even go further out and you look at, the wearables for healthcare and some of the what you can do with bioanalysis and so on in what I call smart health. But we spend a lot of time on what we call beneficial AI. And you bringing up the sensing and the capabilities of working with the power lines and recognizing what's going on, if there's any fault detection, and how it can dramatically help us in preventing fires and so on, which not only in California but throughout the world. As things heat up, there's a lot more fires that are getting out of control, and power lines seem to be a part of that. So this that's a phenomenal application. But looking back at when you look further out and you look at your thoughts on beneficial AI, and where else do you think we can make an impact on helping society?
Yeah, that's something we care deeply about too. We call it machine learning for good. Some areas that we focus on already today. I don't think it's something we need to wait for in the future. We can actually do a lot today already. We recently worked on a project together with Microsoft and the WWF and several other organizations to create an elephant tracker We actually built a real elephant tracking platform, and opened it up as a competition for the community where they could develop machine learning algorithms that run on this tracker. And the tracker has accelerometers, it has GPS location, it has audio, it even has a small camera. And they could develop algorithms to help improve the protection of elephants, prevent, elephant-human conflict areas, right? Not only poaching, but just like encroachment in general. And that's something that we then built and we have going out into the field now with a partner called Smart Parks, who builds these kind of animal tracking systems for national parks. And that's going into real use in Africa. So the most advanced kind of tracker ever built. And that is machine learning powered. So we helped create that in order to show the community where machine learning can be used, right, for animal conservation. And that's a theme that we have a lot of activities going on with. We're just getting ready to announce a new program, which you'll hear about soon, where we're working with a major wildlife technology conservation group in order to have a competition for research field groups. So people in the field doing nature conservation work to get a financial grant from Edge Impulse to go and get their work shipped in the field, because we're really interested in, getting machine learning really out there and used in helping with nature conservation. So we'll have a couple of grants that we grant this year, and we'll assign an engineer to help them out. And we'll really help them, use Edge Impulse to get their algorithm that helps them in the field. It could be bioacoustics, it could be low power camera traps. It could be, anything, even like sensors detecting vibration for insects. The sky's the limit of what's possible. But we want to help those kind of groups, use machine learning in their research.
That is fantastic, and those are powerful use cases. So thank you. And that's the type of stuff that gets me excited, and especially with our technology and what BrainChip's doing, focused on computing at the edge without any requirements to or assistance from the cloud or communication back to the cloud. We feel that we'll be impactful in these areas as well. So this is great. Thank you. I have one last question for you, Zach. And I believe, if I'm correct, that your products have been used in over 27,000 projects. With that being the case, this is the perfect question for a guy like you. What is your favorite Edge AI application so far?
Yeah, that's a hard one because there are so many. For me, right, like I'm very much a kind of ocean type of person. I love water. I do a lot of water sports. And so application that is waiting to be created really, but it's inspiring for me is there's a conservation group that we have been working with in the US, and they are planning on using TinyML in a kind of dolphin and whale monitoring solution. So trying to use, automated like tiny, microphones under the water on buoys, for example, to monitor, dolphin and whale activity and try to identify species automatically right on the edge, right, and get that data over satellite to their research. And I think that's really inspiring for me, right? Being able to kind of decode. There's a recent issue of National Geographic has an entire section on whale behavior and culture, right? And how they're using language and the language changes between pods of dolphins or orcas or whales. I think that's really fascinating. It helps us get a better peek into how these other species communicate and behave. I think that's amazing use of the technology. So that's my favorite one so far that I'm hoping comes to life in the next year or two. But yeah, anything like that really, really inspires me of how this can be used.
Kind of the same thing on this end. Some of the discussions we have kind of blow your mind on where people recognize that we can capture data, process the data, and really leverage it. And that's a good thing. Zach, I want to thank you very much for your insight and joining us today on this podcast. It's truly appreciated. Personally, I'm really looking forward to future conversations with you. I'm also really excited about what you're doing with Edge Impulse and seeing the impact that you guys will make on the ecosystem. And for those that have not spent time on the BrainChip YouTube platform, do yourself a favor and get to know the channel BrainChip Inc. and take a look at our demo videos and our application videos. On behalf of the BrainChip team, we want to thank all of our listeners and everyone truly interested in learning more about our AI solutions and the AI ecosystem in general. We truly appreciate all of your passion and support. Our podcast series will continue next month. Until our next podcast, we wish everyone to stay healthy, happy, and most importantly, stay out of trouble.
Thanks for listening to the BrainChip podcast. Please remember to rate and review on your favorite podcast platform.